You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
You are very welcome. I am Ahonu, and this is my lovely Aingeal Rose. And today we are blessed to have with us the great Penny Kelly. Now let's position this a little bit before we bring you on, Penny, because Aingeal Rose and I, but especially Aingeal Rose, has been going through a pretty hard time this last while with this information. And specifically, we're talking about the information from Mauro Biglini's book, The Gods of the Bible. And just explain briefly, Aingeal Rose, why it has caused such a hardship and why we want to talk to Penny today.
Well, as I was discussing with Ahonu, it's like I'm not a Bible study person. I've never really gotten into the Bible ever. Never really wanted to. Oh. And but even so, the information that he's presenting in this book rattled my cage big time. Okay, and I'm going to let you take the lead on this and introduce it the way you want, and then I'll talk about my reactions and why I had them, and I think why a lot of people might have them. Mm-hmm. Okay, because this is I went through a horrible period of feeling abandoned, completely abandoned, okay, and kind of searching for, well, who is up there? You know what I mean? Okay, so I'm just going to turn it over to you, Penny, and let you start where you want to start, and we'll lead into that as we go.
Okay. It's not an easy book to just kind of say, okay, let's dive in. But the basic message of this book of Mauro's book is that the Bible has been mistranslated. And my own personal observation is that a lot of people are not discerning that a book has been mistranslated. They are then mistranslating that message and saying, oh, you're saying God doesn't exist. And that's not what's happening.
Right.
So there have been a number of things that he has pointed out that indicate, I think there's a double whammy. Not only is the Bible mistranslated and all of the references to some other beings from elsewhere in the universe are here and have been managing us. But, you know, where's God in all of this? Yeah. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say it at the end, I have had an experience, Kundalini, of awakening to that God self, that God that isn't anything like what people who read the Bible think of him as. Yes. And so there is a God. It's just not the same kind or the same functions that people have thought, but there's another better way that you can discover. And that's the great gift in all the hubbub.
Penny, in lots of ways, this information is not new in that we've seen for example, in the exploration of the Egyptian monuments and so on, we've seen indicators that show that there have been beings coming from extraterrestrial beings and brought knowledge and information to the earth. We've seen it in Mesopotamia. We've seen it in the works of the translations from the Anunnaki and all of that. But what I'm amused at is that even though you do have this information that has come to us over the last number of years through archaeology and various methodologies, it's very hard for people to shift, to make that move to, is this possible? Yeah, that's what I find really interesting. And he spells it out as plain as day, and still we find, whoa, could this be true? You know?
Well, I think for me, one of the big realizations was it's the same beings controlling the world now. And I think that I've kind of made this connection from how long ago that was when we were first created and planted in the garden, by the way, to the beings that are still demanding obedience and control, everything from politicians to the medicine to, you know, on and on we go. These authority figures are, they're the same beings, okay? And I think I was just really kind of shell-shocked into that realization as I read this, especially when he just talks about how the old concept of original sin was made up, the whole idea of guilt and blame was made up, and that you're sinning against some exterior God. I mean, all of that, and just think about everybody's kind of groomed to think that when they grow up, you know? Like, where's your conscience, you know, and guilt and blame, and this one's guilty and deserves punishment. And
let me ask
when you die, you're still in sin.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, you were raised Catholic, weren't you?
Yes, both of us.
The one true religion, Penny.
Okay, one of the true, maybe. I'll go that far. So did you really believe the original sin thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I went to a Catholic school, so you know, every time the bishop would come in and we'd all have to stand up and, you know, the whole thing of going to confession repeatedly.
Right.
He'd slap you across the face then.
No, they never got.
Oh, we did.
Slapped you, maybe.
At conference, well, I got slapped, all right.
Yeah.
Because I was asking questions. Seriously, I was asking questions at that early age that just did not make sense to me. You know, some of that dogma, it just couldn't, it just could not make sense. And the more I asked questions about, the more I was seen as a kind of a rebel or a
blasphemer,
and a heretic. Seriously.
Oh, wow.
And you know what happened?
You in that role.
I know. But interestingly, Penny, I went the other way. I went into the religion to see what was I missing. And I became an altar boy, and I, you know, worked with the priests and all the rest of it. And then I started to see some really questionable things. Like, for example, the priest, as an altar boy, I was preparing I've forgotten the
water and wine,
the crucibles, the water and wine, all that, to go just before going out to mass, going out to say mass. And the priest would take the little glass thing and he'd take a big slug of the wine himself and he'd put it back on. He said, fill that up again. And I'd fill it up again. And then he'd go out to say mass. And now, seriously, I'm not trying to be derogatory. I'm just saying that as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, my head was saying, something just not right here. Like, that's not right. Yeah. And then, and of course, multiple other reasons why I was questioning. Yeah. But I went through that whole deep Catholic indoctrination for a lot of years in Holy Catholic Ireland. And thankfully, I came out. I was going to be a priest. And I came out the other end.
Until you discovered sex.
Yeah. Amen.
That's what the kibas.
That made me a sovereign being.
I think that happened to a lot of people.
Well, in some ways,
nuns as well, I think.
In some ways, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a background as to where the questioning for me, anyway, was a long way back. Yeah. And it's only now that, like, through the help of these guys who are willing to expose truth or are willing to do deep investigation, that is showing that perhaps my intuition was right, and a lot of people's intuition was right, that there's, you know, there's truth here that's been hidden from us. So, and you've done a lot of work with consciousness, Penny. So we would love to hear from you. Like, how does this information fit in with consciousness?
I think it's from my point of view, it is the release of all the dogma, all the mistranslations, all of the, what I'm going to call the false beliefs or the misplaced beliefs, and frees up consciousness. I've really, a long time ago, I read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Yeah. And it's a whole different approach. And and the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of
Mhm.
Thomas and of Judas. There's a whole bunch of Gospels that have not been included. And I don't remember every detail of each one, but I do remember thinking, why were these left out? These are key pieces to what the man was teaching. And I think they got left out because they would have led to the enlightenment, the true enlightenment, and the coming into power of the consciousness and therefore of the individual. And the church didn't want that. And there's a few other pieces that I think are very key. Maybe we can mention these, maybe not later down the line, but where did those Elohim go? If
Well,
they're
you know
still
what?
here.
You've
They're
raised,
still here.
well, they are, I think, because you put your finger on something very important there. You said where the church didn't want us to know. But the church has to be the Elohim, because the Elohim didn't want us to know.
Yeah, I
So I
know.
know that's a stretch, but
That's not much of a stretch.
well, but you see where I'm going with it. So, and that's why we also feel that in places of power in the world today, it has to be that same agenda,
Yes,
because
it
they're
is.
all about keeping humans controlled and stifled, and
Right.
certainly not stepping into their own power.
Yeah, okay. So let's back up just a little step here. So one of the things that I have talked about over the past year, which I was very kind of shy about bringing up, was that I came here to counter the takeover effort. And I didn't focus a whole lot. I did say, look, you guys, there's a takeover effort that has been going on for a very long time, longer than you can probably imagine. And and that has to be countered in order for us to really escape that, number one, and two, come into our own potential. The whole thing is about reaching the human potential. So the two agendas are running in competition at this point, and one agenda is run by the hidden controllers. We'll call them Elohim. You can call them the elites. You can call them, they're the bloodlines that have been very carefully tracked over time to make sure who's from that original bloodline and who's not. And so there's a whole lot that could be said there. And I would, there's, so let me just stay on track here for a moment. So that when I come along and say, here's how reality actually works, or here's how we got here. There are beings who go around the cosmos and they seed life. They seed life and then they watch over that and they nurture that and they try to prevent that civilization, that group of life, in some form. They prevent that or try to prevent that from going down the tubes and having to start over. And here we are. Each time you come to a threshold where you could take an evolutionary step, there's big turmoil. And the people who like to be in control are usually the ones creating all that turmoil because they're almost about to take over. But as the patterns become clear, consciousness recognizes patterns big time. And so after a while, what happens is people begin to say, hey, what's going on here? This doesn't look right. It doesn't quite feel right. And they stand up. They begin to speak up. The early people get shamed. Some get taken out. Some get made fun of, ridiculed, sidelined, fired from their job, whatever. But people keep standing up, and the hope from those beings that seed and nurture life is that eventually the whole group will stand up together, and there will be this, we're not going there. And they take a step, and there's always the potential of taking, a whole bunch of steps at once and really creating a heaven world. But even a small step is greatly appreciated by those of us who realize how much effort it is to make that shift. Look at just the three of us. We're fairly well read, we're fairly well developed, and still the information, at least for a lot of people, about gods of the Bible or the naked Bible or those other gospels, it's like, whoa, it's a shock, and it rattles. What'd you say? Rattles your chains or your cage? Or
My brain.
your brain.
My brain. It's like, when you put a can of paint in the mixer, you're the machine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But I wanted to ask you, because in the beginning you mentioned that you said there is a God out there.
Yes.
Okay. Can talk to us about that, Patty, because I think for
Oh,
me, when I read this and the fact that he kept referring to Yahweh, who I've never believed in anyway, Yahweh being an Anunnaki God or an Elohim God or whatever,
right.
not the real God. And the fact that the real God's not mentioned. So can you talk to us about the real God so that we're not all left? I mean, I felt very abandoned at first. I felt like, well, who, when I'm really troubled and I say, God, please help me. It was kind of like, well, who can I say that to now other than myself? Okay.
There you have it. There you have it right there.
Yeah.
So just hang on to that thought. The real God, when you have a full-blown Kundalini experience, you become that God. You recognize that God, that you are in God. You're made of God. God is in you, and there's no difference between the two of you. What in the old days, let's see if I can bring that up. Back in the days of when Jesus was teaching, they talked about the body, the soul, which is the mind, and we call it the psyche, and then the spirit, this stuff. What they were really talking about, or what they were trying to do, was to figure out, okay, what's what? And the body is this, and then we have this mind and this perception. But what can you do with that mind and that perception? And why is it that sometimes something else seems to come in to be seen? You have a vision. To be heard, you get a message. To be felt, you have this overwhelming gut feeling or gut knowing, just like yours, Ahonu, watching the priest saying, what? Something's not right here. There's this gut knowing, and that's, how do you deal with that? And so that's what they were dealing with back then. What we know now is that all realities are created by the minds of beings who shape that reality, who take it in a certain direction, because they are the God stuff expressing within a particular area or region of space. That space actually is vibrating. Those vibrations are frequencies. Those frequencies carry consciousness. The kind of frequency makes a difference as to what kind of consciousness you'll have, how you'll see, how you'll react. And a very high frequency is one thing, a very low frequency is another. They're all useful. And we here on this planet or in this reality only have a small range. There are other realities. The God, when you encounter that God and you become that, nothing else exists except for this immense love that has no description.
Right.
It's been 45 years now for me since the introduction and the relationship with that Godhead And that there's still no words that can even begin to approach the bliss, the love, the contentment, the satisfaction, the feeling of I am. And that's all I need. It's just I am. And that bliss then, that occurs when everything is in perfect relative harmony and balance. Whenever the frequencies get out of balance, then you have this force in which they attract and try to go back into balance. Fortunately, humans are so interesting and so interested in everything around them. They're curious. They want more experience. They want to feel more, know more, see more, do more. And so they keep on creating. So the bottom line for the Godhead is when you're in the Godhead, that's it. Without you, the creator, there's no creation. That's just the bottom line. And that is what has been trained away from us by the religion, the dogma, and other races of beings, not the bad one. There are, there's some people out there who say, oh, all the ETs are good. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to contradict somebody who's really very, involved in that and has only had really good experiences. But where I come from, that is not the case. And there are people here who I have been trying to take over. This is their third attempt at a complete takeover. And there's big gaps in between. They're not interested in primitive people. They wait until we begin to have a technological society and we have some capability to understand and not react like animals to the technology and to begin to be able to follow orders. They want people who follow orders and only obey. They don't want anybody thinking for themselves. And there's a really ugly agenda behind that. There are things that go on. You hear little bits and pieces here and there about what happens with children and slavery and off-planet trafficking. And that is what we are up against. And I don't want to focus on that because that just scares people. But the fact of the matter is that there's another whole group of people here, and they are saying, nope, not going there. Nope, we didn't seed that group of people to have them come this far and get taken over by you guys. And that's what the whole mRNA thing is about, getting you patented so that you're recognized. And so the group saying no is saying, come on, let's raise our consciousness. Let's step into our wisdom, our grace, our power. Grace is the ability to align with the positive energies. So wisdom is when you know the difference between the positive and you can see, you have enough vision to look ahead and see, where does this pattern go? What does this kind of thinking and behavior lead to? And you say, no, you have to have discernment. And so what the Godhead offers is this incredible peace, this incredible wisdom, and this incredible sense of what I'm going to call separation or detachment. When you step into that self that is the Godhead formed as man, humans, that's what Jung called the observer self. If you're just looking from the physical, the human, you're going to get all tangled up. You're going to get all freaked out. You're going to be upset. There's all kinds of limitations. And so what I think you do, and Gail, and what I have done in my classes is try to develop people and get their understanding of what's out there, that Godhead, to a much higher level, to a much more inclusive kind of perception. And people have to choose. They will choose. That there's been talk for a long time about the great rapture, the great culling kind of thing. What is that? That's merely the people who choose to say, I'm going to develop the whole self. And those who say, I want what we used to have.
Yeah.
I'm going back. And so that's where the choice is. And that literally creates a new timeline that people move along. And for a long time, they're very close, parallel, but they move further and further apart until you can't see the other anymore. And so there we have it.
That's why Source called it the split when it told me about it. It didn't call it a shift, it called it a split.
That's exactly what happens. It is a split.
Yeah.
So before we move on, I want to just ask you, so how would you describe Kundalini? Would you say Kundalini is the God force in your body? Would you call it electricity? What would you call it?
Okay. Probably the simplest, most accurate description would be the awakening to the Godhead within. And you have to have enough energy to do that. So you have to have more energy, electricity moving through you. That electricity is energy. And when you have enough energy moving through the system, each individual is a little region in space of a whole bunch of unique arrangements of frequencies. We are frequency. When you have this massive throughput of electricity, you will have enough energy to reconfigure that set of frequencies that you are. And everybody is always looking for more energy. And if you're just focused on the physical, then you're going to, be looking for more money. You're going to be looking for more property. You're going to take stuff away from people. You're going to hurt people. You're going to kind of act vampirish, like a vampire in terms of trying to get more energy, never really understanding that it's electrical energy that you are trying to move through you and to accumulate enough so that those frequencies, arrangements that you already are, can rearrange at a more efficient and much more powerful level that keeps you in touch with the Godhead. So I have been in that now for 45 years, and I say to people, I keep my big toe in that bliss all the time. And people often will say, well, how come that didn't upset you? Why didn't you get mad about that? Why, on and on. And it's because there's a certain level of detachment or separation that you have. It doesn't interfere with any of your joys or any of your fun, but there's this detachment that allows you to be looking at things from that God self and not from the physical only self.
Yeah. Penny, that was a beautiful answer that you gave to Aingeal Rose when she asked about God. And I didn't want to interrupt you, but in your explanation of it, there were so many questions that were coming up.
Okay.
And I'd love to ask one of them now. And it's a question that a lot of people ask, and a lot of people have asked us. When you mentioned about raising your consciousness and raising your frequency, a lot of people say, well, what is that? What does that mean? Like, what do I do to do that? And if I could just, before you answer, the way I understood that was Aingeal Rose in 2019 went through this dark night of the soul where she was talking about the dimensional split.
Right.
And at that point in time, she was told that it is a choice. It is just a choice of saying, I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to stay with the old paradigm with the corruption and with the fear and all that, or I'm going to choose love instead. That it's as simple as that, that in that very choice is the frequency jump.
That's right.
Am I right in understanding that?
You're right. That's right. The ugly, mean thoughts have a very low frequency. The beautiful thoughts, beauty, just beauty is a very high frequency. When you look at some of the art that began to come out, you know, the Campbell's soup can is one. Some of the Mondrian art where it was just paint thrown on a canvas, and you're like, okay, yeah, I guess. Those that is an indicator of where we're in some kind of transition and nothing makes sense, and there is no beauty. So beauty, harmony, love, if you don't or haven't ever had a chance to give and have the reaction of giving to somebody and they are utterly grateful, and you both end up in tears, that's another example of a very high frequency. And so the high frequency, you can let's see. So let's have a little bit of an intuition 1 class, okay? So the human being is made of frequencies. The brain cycles through a set of frequencies every 2 hours, all day long, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It cycles through beta, which is your everyday consciousness, alpha, and then which is lower. It's kind of a daydreamy state. And then theta, which is very creative. It's kind of, most people experience theta as fatigue, but it doesn't have to be fatigue. And then there's delta, which is when you're totally focused inward and you're often asleep and there's no response to the world. And you're in that period of time when you're in delta, your frequencies, the brain, all of you is kind of resetting. You are using your frequencies to replenish very delicate chains of peptides and polypeptides and proteins that get used up in the course of doing the everyday thing. And they have to be replenished. So you need the nutrition, and then you need this downtime where you're not interfering into those creative frequencies with all this mental frequency stuff that goes on. So then you cycle back up from delta into theta, into alpha, into beta, and then back down. And often we move up now into high beta. It's kind of a high stress state. And now we have identified gamma, which is 30 cycles per second. Most people live at 12, 14 cycles per second. It's 12 to 14 hertz. That's your everyday consciousness. When you want to do intuitive work, if you do it up in high beta, you're going to wear yourself out. But if you move up into gamma, you move into another dimension altogether. And there are different ethics, different perspectives, different ideas about the rules, about what could be, about possibilities. And so that you won't really know what cycle you're in, or, you know, what frequency you're in, unless you've really done a lot of research and work around that. And I'll say this, when I first started out, I was involved with Michigan Holistic Health Association and Dr. Dick Williams and a bunch of other people way back in early 70s, or I'm sorry, early 80s. And I heard these terms, alpha, beta, they were just discovering these various frequencies. And so I took those and did a whole bunch of research into, well, what happens when I'm in alpha? What happens when I'm in theta? What happens in high beta, and so on. And so I thought I was working from like alpha to do my intuitive work. And then I got hooked up to a bunch of brain wave equipment, and it was very sophisticated. And what we discovered was that I was splitting. I put the body in alpha so it would relax, and I would move consciousness up into gamma, where I had access to everything. And that was a surprise for all of us. And people said, well, how are you doing that? And I was like, I don't know. But it's very similar to channeling. When you channel, you have to put your everyday self aside, and you have to, there's a few things that I do physically to move into those very high ranges of frequency. But the thing that they were surprised about, especially people from the University of Chicago, were like, most people can only bump up into gamma 30 to 40 cycles per second for a minute or two, and then they come back down. And I discovered, and I think this is a result of an awakened consciousness, I could move up there and stay up there for hours and hours, and move down to do something in the physical world, and go back up to get information, and back and forth, and have conversations while up there. And so that was kind of a revelation. And some people wrote some stuff about that, and I have some photos. It's like, oh, look at that. And so I think what, now I've lost track of the original question, but I think in terms of
high frequency.
I think in terms of how to move up, one of the ways of at least getting used to other frequencies is to meditate. I don't meditate much anymore. I don't have time, and I don't need to, because I can move into whatever level of beingness that I need to be in.
Well, let me ask you another question along the same lines. You did mention about the vampire energy, how that comes from the Elohim and all of what we started off talking about. And then also how that vampire energy is always about taking, right?
Yes.
Now, we were discussing this morning something that we found rather interesting, that in the Bible, it talks all the time about the Elohim, and the Elohim demanding people serve them. And it was all
sacrifice animals and
sacrifice
children and all sorts of things.
Yeah, but specifically it was about serving, and that's also a church obedience. Yeah, a church thing about serving. And what we figured, or what we realized, it kind of hit us quite quickly, was that if you give unconditionally, then you're not serving, and you're not being a vampire, you're not taking. So it's like making that choice, where you said, like, I'm choosing love instead.
Right.
And that's how easy it can be. And you've beautifully described it almost like from a spiritual, technical perspective. But the way I understood it is, it's a choice of saying, I'm choosing love instead, and I'm choosing to give instead of take.
Yeah.
And I don't want to oversimplify it.
It's very simple. That's why people can't get it.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it does make you happy when you give something to somebody else. And they're happy. They become happy, or they, no matter what it is. I used to make little fairies, and just to see people smile at a little fairy would just, that was great.
Yeah.
So and even my 47-year-old son, every year I make little Christmas ornaments for them. And they're usually fairies of some type. My son called me up, and he goes, Mom, we decided you should sell those. That's your, like, my son has collected every single ornament I've ever made for the past 10 years. And his girlfriend said, okay, now we have to get a bigger tree. But I mean, just to see smiles on their faces, something small like that, it doesn't matter if it's small or big, that the whole act of giving to somebody is happiness.
As opposed to taking. Yeah.
But I wanted to go back just for a minute, way back to the beginning here, and talk about my reaction to this book.
Yeah.
Because first I was very angry, and then I was really depressed. Remember, Ahonu?
Yes.
And he goes, it's not like you to be depressed. Why are you so depressed? And I said, I just feel vulnerable. Okay, that was the word I used. And so then it went from that to, I woke up this morning, and I had this sense of power, Penny, that I've never experienced before. It was this inner voice that kept saying, well, you don't have to be dependent upon anybody else for anything. You can go do this, you can go do that, you can create. So, like, it was kind of like a release. It was like, oh, all this time I've been dependent on XYZ for this or that was gone. And it was kind of like saying, you can do this. You're powerful enough to do all this. And it was such a big realization on a level that I hadn't had before,
Oh,
where I
wow.
really felt independently powerful is the word I want to use.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. You know,
Nothing needs to be added.
yeah,
So,
but I feel like I had to go through those emotions. I didn't analyze them. I just let myself feel them. First it was
Excellent.
anger, and then it was disgust. I think I was disgusted at the degree of the manipulation and the degree of betrayal and lies. And then it went to, I'm
let me
just
say
depressed.
something. I think that that's exactly what the general population is going to go through. When you want to expand consciousness, you have to go through that realization that you have been manipulated, you have been suckered, and
Yeah.
there's this that comes up, and then you're free. So
That's the way, that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up, because I do want to tell people there is a process to this that you might go through when you start realizing this stuff.
Very good.
You know,
And in fact, there's a friend of ours. She's also, I understand, a student of yours, Penny, and she has voiced concern about how to help people cope with this kind of realizations, because she feels that it will be devastating, not only to their own kind of psyche themselves, but also to society. She feels there'll be like a societal breakdown. Do you see that happening in any way? Yeah.
I do.
Tell
Yeah,
us about that.
that's what I've been thinking about the last few days. It's like, okay, if this, if this really, because I see it actually happening, when this becomes widespread knowledge, what's all happening at the same time is that the government is looking like it has clay feet. The medical system can't be trusted. The schools are doing something awful instead of teaching. The financial system is not something we can depend on. And now there goes our God. Well, you talk about the
collapse.
right.
Collapse of the old paradigm.
Yeah. So what really has to happen is for people to stand up and say, and I was thinking about this. It's like, I know now why you guys had me have that Kundalini thing. Is so I would stand up and say, hey, there is a God. Never mind the book, never mind the translation, never mind the years of feeling like you weren't good enough or you had some sin or you whatever. The whole thing is about moving beyond that. And anger is change energy. It's so that's going to happen. And there's this immense, what I'm going to call field of creativity that's beyond that anger, and a whole new world waiting to be put together, restructured, reorganized. And that I think is very exciting, especially when you think to yourself, wow, we have a whole new foundation on which to build. We don't have the corruption anymore. We don't have the financial threat hanging over our head. We don't have false ideas about who's in charge, the Godhead. It's us. And we're going to experience what we create, and so on and so on. And we don't have that whole medical issue. We can get healthy and stay healthy. And life is good. Life will be, and it will be. It will be absolutely, I think, so good that people are almost afraid to touch that, afraid to imagine that.
Yeah.
And that's really, well, let me bring in a point here. One of the things that the Gospel of Mary Magdalene had as a key piece was this, there's the physical realm, and then there's the realm of God, which is the void. Nothing there. What's in between? How do you get from this God to this realm that we're in? And what she said was, that's the imaginal realm. That's where you have to imagine and create. and that just got wiped right out of the Bible.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes.
the
Yes.
But what,
capacity
when
to-
people reference that Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and where is that exactly? That you know?
that's, you can probably find that online. There's still a lot of religious stuff in in that book, but it's a guy named of Leloup, Leloup, and I think his middle name is Yves. I forget what the first name is. I'm sure it's somewhere. Yeah, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. That's the title.
Okay. Yeah.
So what she says a lot of things, but what she says is, and she's having this confrontation with Peter and Andrew. She says, look, you guys, you're not getting it. It's not just about the practical, what are the rules and who do we follow? It's about what are we creating? What's going on in the mind, heart, the spirit of the self? Where's that imagination? And people who have written about her gospel have said she's not talking about the kind of imagination that, in fact, that whole term imagination has been degraded to be fantasy, illusion, not real, don't bother.
Yeah.
And that's not what she's saying. She's saying what comes is vision and voices, and you have to pay attention to those and decide, what are you going to give presence to? What are you going to give your time and energy to? Because that results in the world we're in. And way back then they were saying, well, look, we can have a better world. Well, here we are, still trying.
Yeah. So when you started off talking in our discussion today, Penny, we talked about the Bible and how our world effectively was shocked by these kinds of revelations, and about how the Elohim, heretofore we had this impression, or were told that the Elohim was God, and now we're finding it's not. And
Or
so
angels.
or angels indeed, and that it was all miraculous, but we find that it was destructive and jealous and vindictive gods, all of that. And now you're painting a very beautiful picture, a very rosy picture of our potential, of our future, and it feels as if we're on the cusp of it.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So rather than look to the world now on the outside as being full of fear and potential fear and disaster, we can shift that perception to look at it as potential for this wonder and this beauty and this glory that you're talking.
That's exactly right. When you want to open to that level of beingness, that level of consciousness, you have to let go of some of the crap, a lot of all of the crap eventually. But you start with, okay, let's let go of that. Let's not worry about that. Let's do this. And pretty soon you're not worrying about what they're doing over there. You're focused on what do I need to do over here? And how do I do that in such a way that it contributes to the world that I would like to be part of?
Yes.
And that's where your time and energy goes. And that creates the widening split that we talked about earlier. And I think the thing that's really disheartening for people, and it was for me in the beginning after Kundalini, you don't have any time. You don't get much time to get ready for Kundalini, the kind that I had, the spontaneous, explosive kind. And so all of that adjustment, all of that grief, all of that confusion, all of those questions, all of that fear, you hit, boom, like a brick wall, and you have to deal with it. And I think, I'm watching the world go through exactly what I went through with Kundalini, except they have the luxury of a little bit of time. And the Bible, it's been a mainstay. Let me add something in here as well. if you read the work of Anatoly Fomenko, he says point blank over and over, look, 1500, 1800, at least 1200 years was added to the timeline, and that Jesus was working in what we think of as the 1500s, the 1200s, something like that. The Shroud of Turin has been dated to the 15th century, I think it is. So if you take out the extra time that was inserted and the stuff that was declared to be happening in Bethlehem and Jerusalem and all around there, if he is correct, then Jesus is much closer to us in time, and the takeover effort is much more prescient in terms of time. And if you know how takeover proceeds, what you see is, oh, they're right on schedule, and we need to take the steps of stepping into our own power and wake up to that great love within. It's so strong, and live by that, live with that, live in that, live through that. And that then means that miracles are possible, because if you're the one creating and you're the one imagining, picturing, having the visions, then everything that you imagine is what's going to come to be in the physical realm. So there's the source of miracles right there. You're working from that self that is the Godhead, not the physical.
One of the things that I find, and this is just my own personal thing all through my life, but especially since meeting Aingeal Rose, I've spotted countless synchronicities that I call sometimes miracles, because I mean, some of them are crazy in the sense that we'd be driving along the road and at 55 miles an hour in a 55-mile zone, and we're 55 miles to our destination and it's 55 degrees, or crazy, like ridiculous things like that, right? But right now, as we record this interview with you, it's January, which is 1/11 or 11/1. I don't know which way you say it in the US. 11/1. It's 11/1.
No, the month.
Oh, sorry, 1/11, 11:55 right now.
Oh,
and seriously, I'm only picking that up because I want to use it by way of reassuring people, because many people have said to us too, I'm starting to see these synchronicities all over the place.
I know.
And this is people saying to us, I'm seeing these, I'm seeing 11/11s, I'm seeing 12/12s, I'm seeing these numbers. Can you just address that quickly before we get to the top of the hour? Like, can we look to those as being somehow reassurances or indicators that we're going in the right direction?
Yes, they are, especially the 1111. That is the reminder that there is the one God within. That is the only basis for monotheistic religion. It's the God within. And so people who have been seeing that 1/11/11, 1111 for years, that's a reminder, hey, you're supposed to be looking within. Go within. The wisdom, the consciousness is within. And therefore the heaven is within. Did you know
that Aingeal Rose was born on 11/11? Did you know that?
Oh, no, I did not. Okay, wow. When you have synchronicities like that, that's not coincidence. Those are the points of, I call them, well, I won't say what I call them, but those are moments when a whole bunch of positive factors come together. And, it's something that says, or that backs up, yep, okay, in the world of mathematics and numbers, everything makes absolutely perfect, beautiful, beautiful sense, beautiful patterns. When you see the patterns in nature and you see the patterns on a page of calculus, most people don't get that, but there's a beauty in that and truth in those numbers. And calculus is about truth. Is it true or is it not true?
Yeah.
And so here we are with numbers backing us up over and over again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to ask anything before we close, Aingeal Rose?
Well, just real quick, we did have the same person who sent us some of this stuff Ahonu was talking about.
Okay.
Wanted to know, what does an actual day look like for you, Penny? She was basically saying, how does Penny use her time to kind of evolve and stay in this higher place?
Wow.
So like, do you mentally create, or do you just allow, or what? You know, because there's a difference between manifesting and surrendering.
Now
You know
I
what I
have
mean?
to think about that. It's been in the beginning of the Kundalini changeover to a more expansive consciousness. I couldn't focus on anything except what the hell is happening here. And so there was this huge effort. It took me 17 years to finally say, okay, this is how I am. It's not going to go back to what it was. You know, what can I do with this? I started to get back into my normal, curious kid self. So what happened at that point was that I stopped fighting. I stopped fighting what was happening. And I started learning from everything I saw, every person I encountered, everything I read, everything I ate or cooked, or we were building big time. We were building this place. This place is huge. It's an old barn converted to, 20,000 square foot home with, 33, 35 bedrooms and, or 35 rooms. And it's a big place. So there was a lot of creation happening there. And there were people coming and going, helping with this or that project. I learned from everyone, how do I want to interact? And so, okay, somebody's texting me madly here. So what became habitual is this way of being that eventually, I think I've talked about this before, where I came to this point where I got really angry with my husband and my father-in-law because they were treating me like what I considered to be a slave. Okay, we'll have dinner at this time and we'll have cookies and coffee at this time, and we want to have lunch ready by here. And I'm like, who the heck do you think you are? So I was, there was this period where so I got very upset, and then my husband embarrassed me just terribly. He yelled at me like I was a little kid, totally misunderstanding what I was asking. And so what did I do? I threw up my hands and said, okay, fine. I'm just going to do what you say. I'm just going to do whatever you tell me to do. And when it all falls apart, it will all be your fault. So I took that attitude, and it was like, and that led to the discovery that I did not have to react. I didn't have to care. I didn't have to get upset. What I discovered was the immense freedom of detaching myself from all of the daily grind, whatever. And that became a key turning point. And that freedom has stayed with me ever since. And so when my day, the morning belongs to me, I come online and start working about 12 noon, and I work until 12, 1, 2 in the morning. I go to bed and I get up the next day. The morning belongs to me. I do my exercises. Sometimes I'll lay in bed and just daydream. It's not really daydream. I'm thinking about things and pulling in perspectives and input and kind of sifting through those. Is that worth thinking about? Is that worth pursuing? There's a lot of ahas that happen in that early morning thing. I do my exercises only take a few minutes, and then breakfast and treadmill and, all that kind of stuff. So,
Gosh.
and then when I interact with people, I'm free. I'm totally free from noon until midnight to interact. And my role is, I'm just going to be me.
Well,
And
thank you for that
sometimes
beautiful
that's
insight.
entirely practical, and sometimes that's, what are
Yeah.
you talking about here? Did you think
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah.
So
Well, that's a beautiful insight into your world, and we appreciate that. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers would appreciate that too.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
What
key
does the king do every day?
what does the what?
What does the king do every day in Camelot? What does, that story?
Okay. No, I haven't heard that story, but
What
that's
does
an
Queen
interesting
Penny do every day?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do all the normal things, I cook and I love to do my own cleaning. But I work 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah.
Us too. And we put in a lot of hours, but we love what we do. This is
Yep.
the interesting thing. And it's like as if there's a prana that you pull in that is sustaining,
Yeah, that is so true. It's breath, when I get to feeling tired, I stop and think, okay, what do I need? Okay, let's breathe. Let's pull in some energy. Oh, keep going. It only takes a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the church has kind of pushed the idea of ceremony and ritual, and I love a little ritual here and there, but I don't have time for a lot of ritual and setup and ceremony. And so I'm creating on the fly as I go.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes. Okay. Well, look,
So do you have any last remarks about
the
Ahonu
Elohim,
Aingeal's books?
the Elohim and gods of the
I
Bible.
know he's been showing up on YouTube a lot lately for some reason.
Oh,
All of a sudden, there's all these videos from interviews with him by other people. And,
I think I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning. Keep in mind that we're talking about a book. The book has been mistranslated. Don't you translate that as meaning that there is no God, because there is a God, and we are about to discover that that God is within and is alive and powerful and wonderful. And yeah, you might be a little bit afraid of your own power at first. That is a natural stage of development, but there's no other way to learn. Just do it.
right.
That's a beautiful note on which to finish. Penny, as always, we are immensely grateful.
We are grateful.
And I know on behalf of our viewers and listeners, we express that gratitude to you for being who you are and for being with us. Yeah. So
okay,
blessings.
thank you. And I love you guys.
We love you too.
We love you too.
You're so good.
Until next time, what can we think of next time?
Okay. There will be something.
It'll be something.
Well, I expect that it'll be a whole new paradigm shift that we'll be becoming aware of, and we can talk about that beautiful experience.
Right.
Yeah, you can't have a paradigm shift with the old God or the old idea about God.
That's right. There you go.
No,
yeah.
you can't.
Okay, Penny, you take care of yourself.
We love you very much. Thank you.
Blessings.
Okay. All right. We'll see you soon. Have a great year.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and on our website at worldofempowerment.com.
Don't miss an episode. Hit the subscribe button now.